Let's get right into it. The European Union's huge, ambitious plan to ban all new gasoline cars by 2035? Well, for all intents and purposes, it's dead. It's falling apart as we speak, and how it all went down reveals this incredible story about power, strategy, and a massive industrial gamble that completely backfired.
So why did this grand plan to go all-electric just collapse? The answer, and this is what's so fascinating, isn't really about environmentalism, not at its core. It's a story of high-stakes industrial strategy, an attempt to basically rewrite the rules for the entire global car industry. And to get why it failed, you first have to understand what the plan really was.
You see, this story doesn't start with climate goals. It starts with competition. The real motivation behind this ban was an attempt to grab back industrial dominance. To really get this, we've got to go back to the 2000s. European car makers were getting absolutely hammered by Japanese companies, especially Toyota, when it came to hybrid technology. They just couldn't keep up. So, what do you do when you're losing the game? Well, you don't try to win, you try to change the rules of the game itself.
And their strategy was this brilliant, deliberate three-step industrial policy, all disguised as a climate goal. Step 1. Roll out these unbelievably aggressive CO2 regulations that normal engines just couldn't meet. Step 2. Use those rules to kill off the internal combustion engine. And Step 3. Force this massive continent-wide shift to all-electric vehicles, a field where they hoped they could leapfrog everyone else.
So this strategic plan was already moving along, but then a huge scandal hits. And this scandal basically locked the plan into place, making it impossible to turn back. It forced the EU to go all in.
The crucial moment is 2015, Dieselgate. This is when everything just went into overdrive. The scandal, which of course started with Volkswagen, completely torched the credibility of the EU's existing strategy, which had been built around this idea of clean diesel.
Literally overnight, diesel went from the EU's hero to its #1 villain. With diesel totally discredited, gasoline cars were obviously the next target. And in all that chaos, hybrid technology, the very thing the EU was trying to beat, was just brushed aside as transitional. This left only one path forward, a super extreme, EV-only position. But here's the thing about making a massive, all-in bet like that. It started to backfire. Fast. The plan began hitting the hard wall of reality in 3 pretty big ways.
First off, the economics just didn't add up. European car companies found out pretty quickly that the profit margins on EVs were way lower than on gas cars. Plus, battery costs were all over the place, and the charging infrastructure needed to make it all work. It was a total mess, completely inconsistent from one country to the next.
Second, and this was the real killer blow, the policy created a perfect opening for China. You see, while the EU was busy debating, China had been quietly executing a massive state-backed strategy for years. They'd built this dominant EV supply chain from the ground up, from rare earth metals to batteries to the cars themselves. The EU basically created the perfect market for a competitor who was already geared up to win it. And third, the EU's whole gamble relied on the rest of the world following their lead. But they didn't. The US, Japan, and all the big emerging markets just refused to go down this isolated, EV-only path. They kept their options open, pursuing a mix of technologies, which left the EU standing all alone on a limb.
So you've got all this pressure building up, from the bad economics, from China, and from being isolated globally. It forced the EU to start quietly backing away from its hardline stance.
Faced with reality, the EU started writing loopholes into its own rules. The biggest one? The approval of so-called e-fuels. Now, these are synthetic fuels that can power regular old combustion engines. This created a critical exception that basically guts the 2035 ban. A ban is not a ban if there are exceptions like this.
And this reversal created a huge problem for the very companies the policy was supposed to help. European automakers that went all in on EVs were left totally exposed, their strategies now described as shaken. Meanwhile, who looks great? Toyota. They pursued an all-around strategy, a mix of hybrids, EVs, and hydrogen, and suddenly they're in a much more flexible and powerful spot.
So what does shaken actually mean? It means these companies are stuck. They've already let go of their best internal combustion engine engineers. They've poured billions into EV-only factories and completely changed their supply chains. They made this massive, practically irreversible bet on a future that the rule makers just changed on them.
So, after all of that, what's the ultimate takeaway here? What's the real lesson from this entire saga?
This quote just nails it. It perfectly captures the heart of this whole thing. The EU tried to change the rules because it couldn't win on the technology. But here's the kicker. The rules don't stick if the rest of the world won't play along. This shows it was never just about saving the planet. It was a cold, calculated attempt to rig the game.
At its core, this whole thing is a record of a failed industrial policy. It's a story about a powerful bloc trying to use its regulatory muscle to reshape an entire global industry in its own favor, and failing simply because the rest of the world refused to go along with it.
The collapse of the EU's plan really shows you just how volatile the future of industry is. This was a clear battle over the future of the automobile, and it leaves us with a really critical question. What global industry is going to be the next battleground for this kind of strategic power play?